Hello, sorry I set a PM instead of an AM. But that's how it is when you do 20,000 things at once and don't pay enough attention. So let's get started now. We're on a new chapter, which is 29. And um, the story is over. It's like Samurai made that amazing visualization of the whole story. So the story is over. Samurai has made her movie of it. And then but there's still one more chapter that's about the story. So what happens in this chapter is Narada explains the allegory, then also tells the moral of the story, and then also gives a new, very fast allegory, a different allegory, real quick one, about a deer in a forest, and then gives a short moral of that story, and then it goes to the then that chapter 29 is done, and it goes to 30, which goes back to the sons of Prachinibari, who are the Prachetas, who are listening to Shiva's song. So, we'll get started. Let me grab some. That's. I don't think we need Sanskrit. Okay. All right, so here we go. Some of the stuff you already know. Basically, hopefully, all of it you already know, but it's nice to hear it again. So, so you just heard the story of the citizen. The citizen in the city, Puranjana. Who was telling that story to who? Narada Muni was telling that story to Barishat, King Barhi. Why? Because Barhi was very external, and all of his ambitions were external, and Narada felt that was anomalous because his children, who he had just met, were very like high quality, deep people. So he thought the father's probably just off track. I could probably get him on track if I go talk to him. So he goes to talk to Barishat and tells him this story, a made-up story, which is an allegory. So now that that's done, Barishat says to Narada, "O blessed one," which is Bhagavan. You can call people Bhagavan too. It just means that they're great. Blessed one, King Barhi said to Narada, "The wise can understand your tale, but people like me, infatuated with obvious things, can't. Please explain the inner meaning of all the obvious details." He didn't even actually give that last sentence. I just stuck it in my translation. Because remember these parokshavat, the indirect or curving speech? People who are kind of more cultured like it. So the king doesn't even really ask the question, he just implies his question. But to help the modern reader, I put it in. So he just says, look, if I was smart, I know that your story is full of meaning. Obviously, it's got all these weird details. If I was smart, I would have figured it out. But I am not smart in this way. I'm smart about external things, obvious things. Karma. I'm a karma kriya person. I do work. I do deeds. I do external things. I don't understand jnana, the inner perceptions, the internal realities of things. So please explain it to me. So that sets Narada up to give a full explanation. So he says, Narada says, okay, the main character in the story was named Puranjana. Puranjana means the citizen. It's actually the same. And he says this Puranjana is a symbol for the Purusha. Purusha means person. And specifically, it means the core of what a person is, which is, in English, we have to say the soul, which we're referring to the source of the source of meaning to the pronoun I. The source of meaning to the pronoun I is the Purusha, the person, the one who has I-ness. And the one who thinks also mama, who has possessiveness, who can relate things to the I. So who can perceive and relate things to I. That's the soul. So in Sanskrit, the word Puranjana literally means citizen, and in the word Purusha literally means citizen. The reason why this person is called a citizen is because he's the inhabitant of the body. And so he's referred to as Purusha. And it also literally means the person who has powers. The city is like the vehicle, and then the citizen is like the driver of the vehicle. So Narada's, in Sanskrit, the allegory is more poetic and beautiful. Even in English, it's pretty poetic. The citizen is actually the inhabitant of the body, who's the soul. So he explains the main character, the citizen, symbolizes the person, the soul, who produces cities. Vyanja. The Purusha is the Deha Vyanjani, the one that actually produces bodies. Well, what causes cells to divide? What causes cells to have energy in the first place? What causes atoms to have the energies that they have that set other things in motion? That energy comes from Purusha, the core being, the being that's having the sense of I and relating things to the I. So it's actually, although the body is produced from a mother and a father, it's actually produced from the soul. The soul's activities produce it, previous activities, and the soul's consciousness animate matter to react and interact with each other and build things. So this Purusha actually, Puranjana, he's the ultimate reason why there are cities in the story. But he's not the immediate reason. The immediate reason is many things that will be explained about the cities. Main character Puranjana, the citizen, symbolizes the person, the soul, who produces cities, and the cities are actually bodies. So the cities symbolize bodies. The citizen symbolizes the soul, the city symbolizes bodies. And he says there's all different kinds of bodies. In the beginning of the story, the citizen Puranjana was wandering from one city to the next, looking for one that he really liked. And each one had something that he liked, but wasn't totally perfect. And so that here Narada mentions there's all different kinds of cities in the story, and those represent all the different kinds of bodies. 1, 2, 3, 4 footed, many-footed, and unfooted. I cannot really, for the life of me, figure out examples for each one of these categories. One-footed is sometimes called serpents or snakes, but also then what's unfooted? Two-footed, obvious. Three-footed, I don't know, maybe birds. Four-footed, obvious. Many-footed, also obvious. But anyway, maybe just for poetic license, or maybe there's actually divisions of these things. Narada says all these different cities are just like all the different kinds of bodies. And we'll just say, by enumerating a whole bunch of different numbers of feet, we'll talk about animals, insects, everything. So in other words, the citizen, the soul, travels through all different kinds of bodies and produces these bodies. This is an important point. The citizen produces all different types of bodies to experience the world in all different types of ways. But he settles down in a particular one that he likes the best. Narada Muni will mention that next. If you have any questions, type them in. Fish. Melissa, that's a good one. Fish. That's brilliant. Fish must be the unfooted. Okay, now the next character in the story. The first character is Puranjana, right? The next character mentioned by Narada was the soul's unknown friend. The person was just called Avigyata, which means the unknown one. And he was called Saka, which means friend. Avigyata Saka, the unknown friend. So that's the second character. Now Narada explains who that is. He says the son's unknown friend Is everything good with volume and voice? Everything, I think it should be good. The soul's unknown friend symbolizes the supreme master, Ishvara. So there's Purusha and there's Ishvara, and they're very similar. Ishvara means the controller or the master. Purusha means the citizen, he's in charge of his powers. But then there's Ishvara that implies that they're more powerful than the Purusha. Like you have a king and an emperor. So the soul's unknown friend symbolizes Ishvara, the supreme master. He's unknown. We call him unknown. Narada gives an interesting thing here that he didn't say before. We didn't hear this before. Why is he unknown? He says because living beings like Puranjana cannot directly perceive him as a nameable entity with qualities and actions. When you know something, you know it by its qualities and actions, and as a result of the qualities and actions, you name it, and then the intellect has a handle, has a variable space for it to work with it when it has a name. So the intellect can conceive it when it's named. But living entities like Puranjana means people who are exploring the external world, they don't directly perceive the qualities and activities of the Ishvara, the master. Instead, they perceive the qualities and activities of the master's external form. So because they don't directly perceive the names and activities of this being, the being has the qualities and activities of this being, then this being goes unnamed and therefore uncomprehended or unknown. Very interesting, right? People are still there? They didn't get cut off? So Puranjana is the citizen, the city is the bodies, the unknown. Puranjana is the soul, the city is the body. The unknown friend is like God. Puranjana, somebody type something in so I can see that you guys can hear me. Yes, okay. So Puranjana was dissatisfied with his cities. Now Narada's going to explain why. The beginning of the story, Puranjana is moving around looking for a place to live. Yes, Sina, that's exactly right. Not just the being, they see this, yes, the being. They see the shell of the divine. We see the shell of the divine, but not the divine himself. So the divine is unknown, but the external shell is known. Puranjan was dissatisfied with his cities until he found one with 9 gates, 2 elephants and 2 foundations. I'm kind of taking liberty with this because I feel like in the story itself, Narada didn't really mention that when he found the city, it had 2 husty and 2 hungry. Maybe when he's explaining it to Barhi, because he just said there's all different kinds of cities with all different kinds of feet, then he categorizes the one that Puranjana liked and settled in where the main story happens. He characterizes it as having 2 feet. So I'm giving the allegory. I might want to take it out later. 2 foundations, so that 2 feet, hungry, and it has 2 elephants, husty, for 2 hands. 9 gates. So he says, in other words, the soul doesn't feel able to enjoy the world fully without a 2-armed, 2-footed human or celestial body. So the fact that Puranjana was moving from city to city and not quite satisfied with any city until he got to this one where the story takes place shows that it's very important to have 2 hands that can manipulate things. When you don't have 2 hands for grasping things, you can't really interact with the world in a fully satisfying manner. Can't manipulate things and move things around very carefully. Nor can you touch things accurately or with sophistication, nor can you create music very well. Birds can do it by singing. But to have the hands, really, you enter a new level of ability to interact with the world. And so the soul kind of all of a sudden feels like, this is the right spot for me. Once it gets to the forms which have 2 legs and 2 hands, which includes humans and higher than humans. So that's why he finally settles down in that one particular city. Then the next thing that happens in the story was that he saw a woman outside the city. As he was approaching the city, he saw a woman. So now Narada explains who she is. She calls him the Pramada, which means the lover, the one that he felt, the one that he beat, how do you say this in English? I didn't even try. The infatuator, the one who you fall in love with. So I'm just, in the translation, I say the woman Puranjana fell in love with is actually intellect. So the Puranjana is the soul, the city is the body, there's an unknown friend, and then the third, what is this now? The third character is Intellect, who in the story is this woman outside the city. He says, intellect is the thing that actuates the soul's, actuates means krita, like the word kritika for the nakshatra. The actuator, the activator. It's not the creator. It's the actuator. Many people don't grasp this. They think that the concept of I-ness is something that's created artificially by a material intellect. And that if you were really enlightened, you would have no sense of I. But this is not a Vedic point of view. The Vedic experience of divinity is that it's the root of I-ness, and it has things which allow the I-ness to manifest, to activate the I-ness. Consciousness itself, which is Brahman, is the root for I-ness. Very good, Zena. What was the name of that group? The acapellas, they would do all these songs with just 4 people with just the male. I can't remember them now. It's been a long time. She's Intellect, Bardo. So the function of the intellect is to actuate or enable the soul's inherent sense of I am mine. Enable it. The woman Puranjana fell in love with is actually intellect, which actuates the soul's sense of I and mine. By joining with her in his city body, he becomes capable of utilizing the body's senses to enjoy the world's quality. So remember in the story, he sees the city, he approaches the city, he meets a girl in the garden outside the city. They agree to unite, to become married. And they go into the city to do that. And then they become established in the city as the king and the queen. So the whole symbolism there is actually the one who's in charge of the city or the body is the intellect. The intellect is the one that's running the whole body. All of your functions are running from the intellect, not from the soul. It's all running from the intellect, but the soul is just the power, the reason why the intellect is functioning. Once the soul joins to the intellect, then it can interface to the body. And through the intellect, it can interface to the body's senses, and through those senses, it can interface to the world that the body exists in. So that's why Puranjana had to meet this woman outside the city and join with her and go into the city. Now, remember when he met the woman, it was a pretty psychedelic affair. When she sees him, all of a sudden she manifests all these friends. Pentatonics, that's the name. Also, there was 5 of them, right? Those guys are fantastic. Fantastic. They must have all recently been birds or Gandharvas. But it's been years since I heard them. At least they might still be around. Anyway, you don't need your hands to do music. You can play your throat, which is a singing instrument. But most of culture and art and science and technology comes as a result of having hands. All right, so remember when Puranjana met the woman outside the city, who was quite psychedelic. as soon as he saw her, she showed that she had 11 bodyguards. And each one of these bodyguards was surrounded by many, many women. And then surrounding them all was a divine serpent with 5 heads. So now Narada's going to explain this. He says the women's 10 male friends. Those are called sakas. The woman has 10 male friends. It's not outrageous, is it? The women's 10 male friends symbolize the intellect's extensions. Which is what? What do you think the intellect's extension is? The intellect, the consciousness is the root thing that will perceive things. The intellect is the power that will allow it to perceive, and it manifests its power by tools of perception. The intellect has powers of perception. That's its expansion. That's the power for visual perception, oral perception, etc. And those are the basis for the physical organs of the senses. So the 10 male friends symbolize the intellect's extensions, which are the 10 senses. Why 10 senses? I thought there was 5 senses, maybe 6. There's 5 senses of perception, but there's also 5 senses of action. So he's going to... he'll enumerate them soon. So she has 10 friends because the intellect has 10 powers to perceive and act. 5 to perceive and 5 to act. And then she has hundreds of female friends circulating around these 10 male friends. And that symbolizes what the intellect likes to do with the senses. The men are the senses, the sensual power of the intellect, the perceptual power of the intellect are these male friends or guards that she has. And then they have all these women around them, and that's what they like to enjoy, right? So the senses like to perform these things. It's their activities. The 5-headed serpent surrounding the woman signifies the vital force that allows the intellect to circulate through the body in the 5 ways. So the intellect has powers of perception, but it has to circulate through the channels to matter, to the external matter, physical matter. It has to circulate from the subtle or energetic matter, whatever you want to call it, into the physical matter to permeate it and experience it. The way that it circulates is called vital force or prana. And it circulates in 5 ways, and that's why the serpent has 5. Alf has some questions. Can we exist in more than one city at a time? I do think that it is possible, but it's not common. It's very unusual. We have Bhagavan animating all our prime Atma, then us as Atma or Jivas. Can the super soul be aware? I'm not sure of all these other questions. Can the super soul be aware of more than one life at a time? Yeah, exactly. It says that exactly in Bhagavad Gita. He says, I can't remember the Sanskrit, but in English he says, I'm eternal, you're eternal. And Natvevaham Jatanasham Neme Shaiva Janadipa. But now I can't remember the second half. It says, I'm eternal, you're eternal, everybody's eternal. Or maybe it's a different one. But the difference is, I remember everything, you forget everything. You forget everything that's not in the present, but for me the present is everywhere. So I remember everything. Bardo wants to know what the mind is. Bardo, my friend, just be patient. Narada will certainly explain it. So the superconsciousness, this Bhagavan is not only aware of more than one present, but also is aware of more than one locus, more than one body. The Bhagavan is aware of all space and all time, all beings in all phases. The Amshas of Bhagavan are aware of their space and their time. And that's us. Okay, so Puranjana met this woman outside the city. She had 10 friends, which are the 10 senses. She had, the 10 friends had all these girlfriends. That's what the senses like to do. She had a serpent surrounding her. That's the way that intellect circulates. Because it's probably she's riding on the snake. Probably she's actually being carried on the snake, if you look carefully at the Sanskrit. Because the prana, or the vital force, is what carries the intellect and allows it to flow through the nervous system to different parts of your body and back and forth. But there's 11 male friends, so now Narada explains that one, and this is for you, Bardo. The 11th male friend is the strongest and most important sense, the mind, which is the confluence for all the other senses. So what is the mind? It's a confluence for all the other senses. All the sense impressions aggregate in the mind and produce some kind of result. And that will also be more thoroughly explained. So don't get impatient yet, or there'll be more about this. So what happened in the story is there was a guy called Paranjana who represents the soul. He was looking through all these cities that he could make or inhabit, that were all the different kinds of bodies that it's possible to live in. He finally came to one that had 2 hands, 2 feet, a human form, a human city, and he liked that one. So he wanted to approach it. In order to approach it, he met a woman outside there, which was the intellect, which allows him to interface with it. This intellect is carried by the vital force, and it has 11 functions with which it can do hundreds of thousands of things. By uniting with the intellect, the soul can unite with the city that the intellect controls, and through the city can enjoy the world. So in intimacy, like sexual intercourse, you don't really go into the other person's city. You never go into another person's city. I'm sorry. You can inference, and you can go into a zone where neither of you are in your city, which is what happens in intense intimacy. So you'll be together in a spot, but you never occupy the other person's nervous system. The person's prana and vitality is linked with yours. This is my opinion. So far, I may be wrong. I may be wrong. The reason why I present this doubt is because bhakti is the thing which unifies, and it will unite the subject to the object. So bhakti is love, and it causes intimacy, and it will unite the 2 lovers, the subject and the object. But the subject remains the subject, and the object remains the object. But they get united in a common space, which is called bhakti. The love is the space in which they're united. So when you're intimate with somebody, you don't actually inhabit their nervous system, but the 2 of you enter a shared experiential state together. That's my intellectualization and an attempt to explain that. Okay, so now the next thing that comes up in the story was he explained what the city looks like and where it exists. So now Narada is going to explain that part of the allegory. He says it exists in a country. The city exists in a little state. Oh, I wish I had my water. The city exists in a state. He said the state was called Panchala, which means the 5s. Remember, I had a little hard time deciding on how to translate that, but I think I'm going to call it the 5s, capital T, capital F. That's the city, that's the country or the state that surrounds Paranjana's city. What does that symbolize? Narada says it symbolizes the world, the experienceable world, because the experienceable world has 5 categories of experience. What are they? You can think about it. He's going to say soon. Then he says the city has 9 gates through which the captain of the city, the Paranjana, the citizen, can go to the 5 the country of the five. So the city can experience the fivefold world. The citizen can experience the fivefold world by exiting the city through the gates. So he says the 9 gates in the city are the eyes, that's 2, the nostrils, the ears, the mouth, the genital, and the anus. 9. Puranjana pairs up with his wife's male friends, the sensory functions, to exit the city and experience the outer world. So in order for, remember this part of the story, all the specific friends were named, the gates were named, the cities where they go to are named. In order for the citizen to use the gates, the queen has to cooperate, the intellect has to cooperate. You can't use your eyes if your intellect doesn't cooperate. So people with eyes might be blind. So in order to use the gate, the intellect's power of vision has to cooperate. And so when the citizen joins with the intellect's friend, which is one of the sensual powers, then it can exit through the gate and experience something out there in the world. I don't know about that, Melissa. Okay, then remember he told, in the story, Narada told Barishat like kind of a blueprint for the city. There's these gates face east, these gates face west, these are lower, upper. He's going to explain that now. He said the 5 gates that faced east signify the senses that are in the front of your body. East means front, purva. So that's your eyes, nostrils, and mouth. Those are the 5 gates, 2, 4, 5, that face east, symbolic east, which means face forward. The gates facing north and south signify the left and right ears. And also, I didn't put it in here because it's long and we already explained it in the translation part of the story, but the right ear is a little different than the left ear. And actually, the right eye is a little bit different than the left eye. But the right ear points south, the left ear points north. And through the right ear, you get, this is actually strange, but through the right ear, you get pravriti, and through the left ear, you get nivriti. Things which you get ideas about the world through your ears. And you, by some yoga, whatever this means, I don't really know. But the left ear is designed for hearing about things that you should, I think it's the left one, that you should get rid of, and the right ear, the other way around. The left ear is designed for hearing about things that you want to get, and the right ear is designed for hearing about things that you want to get rid of. And they utilize this technology when they teach in the Vedic culture. When they're teaching you about something negative that you should get rid of, they talk to your right ear. And when they give you a mantra about that, they give it to the right ear. When they give you a mantra about what you should gain, they give it to your left ear. This is stuff that's like meaningful, like the schematic diagram for an iPhone is important if you know the technology. Similarly, some of this stuff is important if you are deep in this Vedic yoga technology, but for most of us, it's just like, really? All right, so he says the 5 gates facing east signify the senses in the front of the body, eyes, nostrils, and mouth. The gates facing north and south signify the left and right ears. The 2 lower gates facing west are the sensory openings in the lower and rear part of the body. That's the anus and the genital. Puranjana, exiting his city through specific gates and traveling to specific destinations. That was the next part of the story he talked about. Puranjana getting with this friend and going through this gate to go visit this city, right? Puranjana exiting his city through specific gates and traveling to specific destinations signifies different types of sensual perception and action. And here's the types, finally. He'll enumerate the 10 types. So this is why she had 10 friends. The 10 types of sensual perception and action. Visual, easy. Olfactory, that means smell. Gustatory, I had to look up this word, that means taste. Oral, that's hearing. A-U-R-A-L, that's hearing. Tactile, that's touching. Which gate is the tactile sense? The eyes are the visual sense. The ears are the oral sense. The nose is the olfactory sense. The mouth is the gustatory sense. The tactile sense, it's actually which gate? It's actually the genital, which is tactile. Though we have it spread, it spreads out. It's not only focused in one spot. It's an interesting gate, which is kind of integrated with the walls of the city. And then, so those are the five perceptive sense possibilities: visual, olfactory, gustatory, oral, tactile. The five active sensual capacities is communicative. That also comes out of the mouth, primarily. Communicative ability is considered a sensorial, active sensory skill. Reproductive, evacuative, manipulative, and wait a minute. Reproductive, evacuative, manipulative, and mobility. I don't know how to get the grammar right. Okay, so that explains who these. That now like names these 10 friends that the woman has, and these 10 friends operate 9 gates. It's confusing, right? But the gates are in pairs. The eyes are in pairs, so one friend operates them. Nostrils are in pairs, so another friend operates them. Mouth has 2 friends operating it, one for speaking and one for tasting. So now we're up to 4 friends. The skin has the tactile sense has a friend operating it. So now we got those are the 5 perceptive senses. Then you have the evacuative friend. Then you have manipulative friend. And then you have wait, we need one more. The oratory friend, the one for the ears. There's your 10. I need to do this on paper probably. And then because you also have 2 blind friends, remember who are the feet and the hands. So those are the friends, the ones that operate. A friend for the visual, a friend for the olfactory, that's a friend for the gustatory. Ah, so there's 10 friends, 9 gates, because 2 of the friends are concentrated in the mouth. No, that also doesn't explain it. 2 of the friends are also concentrated in the genital, the reproductive and the tactile. And you have to get another 2 friends. 2 friends don't have gates. I'm sorry, this is too unorganized. Let me do this offline and then I'll explain it. All right, so then there's the 11th friend. What does that guy do? That was for the mind, right? Which is the aggregate for all the senses. So what happens is the senses go out. The senses take the consciousness out into the world of 5 things. Then they bring back something from the world into the city, and they take it to a spot where it can be enjoyed, like going out, picking a flower, putting it in a vase in your house, or going out, picking berries, coming back and eating them. So this spot where they come back to put things to enjoy, that's the mind. And in the story, he described this as the Antapura, or the inner city, or the inner chamber. So Pranjana can also experience things within his own city. And also, you don't even need to go out to experience things with your own city. You can re-experience what you've already experienced. Pranjana can also experience things within his own city. Thus, the city has an inner chamber, which symbolizes the emotional heart. The emotional heart is the seat for the mind function. So, if you want to know what the difference between the mind and the intellect is, it's simple. The mind is emotional. The mind is the emotional sense. This thing that senses emotions is the mind, it's symbolized by the moon. The thing which coordinates activity and understands things is Mercury. It's the intellect. Wow, there's a lot of lag. It's like 6 minutes of lag in what you guys type. Um, Paranjana can also experience things within his own city. Thus, the city has an inner chamber, which symbolizes the emotional heart. It is accessed by the chief sensory function, the mind. Accessing it allows the soul to experience emotions like delight, satisfaction, and joy. So, the purpose of experiencing different things out in the world is to bring them back into the mind, which reacts to the experiences by feeling positively delight or lack of delight, or opposite of delight, satisfaction or its opposite, or joy or its opposite. So that's the first part of the story, basically. That's Narada's explanation of the first part of the story, which is just kind of the setup where Narada introduced all the parts, the scenery, and the characters. Now he's going to talk about the way Puranjana did exactly whatever his wife did. Remember that part of the story? When she would stand up, he would stand up. When she would sit down, he would sit down. If she went to sleep, he went to sleep. If she talked, he talked. If she stopped talking, he stopped talking. Remember that part of the story? So now he explains what that symbolizes. He says the way that Puranjana did exactly whatever his wife did symbolizes that the soul experiences life indirectly and vicariously by identifying completely with its intellect. So Puranjana would only experience whatever his wife was doing. When she wanted to eat, he would have food. When she wanted to sleep, he would experience sleep, etc. That's symbolic of the fact that the soul doesn't do anything directly. The intellect interfaces with the body. The soul just observes it. The soul is observing the intellect, but because of the intellect actuates the soul's sense of I, it's not just like observing a separate being. It's like observing yourself. The soul is observing how it's acting because the intellect is acting and it thinks that it's the intellect. And the intellect is coordinating and organizing all the functions of the body and all the actions of the body. And those actions are coming back and creating emotions, and the soul is observing the whole thing. But it's all happening there in the city, in the body. And whatever happens there, the king mimics it. So if there's happiness in the body, the soul feels happy. If there's pain in the body, the soul feels pain. But they're actually two different beings. They're actually two different things. But because one has invested itself in the other, whatever happens to this one affects that one. So he explains the way Pranjana did exactly whatever his wife did. That's how the soul really just lives vicariously through the activity of the body. The second thing, now he says the way Pranjana went off without his wife. Remember that part of the story where he went off without his wife? The way Pranjana went off without his wife symbolizes unintelligent, wanton pursuit of sense gratification. The way that he follows his wife symbolizes actually experiencing satisfaction, joy, etc., vicariously through the activities of the intellect. But sometimes a person gets involved in unintelligent action, and that signifies and that's signified by him going off without his wife. He did so with the help of a chariot. The chariot is the symbol of a body not controlled by proper intellect. The city is the symbol of the body controlled by the intellect, proper intellect, dharmic intellect, good intellect, moral intellect. The chariot that he went on when he went off without his wife signifies the body that it's not controlled by the intellect, by that proper intellect. Of course, it's always going to be controlled by an intellect. So now he explains the analogy of the chariot. In this analogy, the horses symbolize the senses. The driver is the improper intellect. The bridle is the mind. The chariot seat is the heart. The speed with which the chariot moves symbolizes the fruitless passing of time wasted by unintelligent action. The chariot can turn right or left, symbolizing good or bad actions. The steering mechanism related to good and bad symbolizes the results, pleasure and pain. The chariot has 5 objectives, which are the 5 sense objects, and 5 powers, the 5 powers of action. Hunting animals symbolizes exploitive enjoyment of life. So we go quickly through this because we spent time already explaining all this. Now, he gets to the part of the story where Puranjana encounters enemies. So he's going to explain who these enemies are. Puranjana's enemy named Forceful Change, Chandavega. That's the first enemy introduced in the story. What does this enemy symbolize? Forceful change. The force of change, the power of change. That symbolizes the year. And what's the year? Narada says the year is a perceivable aspect of time. Time itself isn't perceivable, but it's perceivable by its effect. And the fundamental effect is the change of positions of things. And the fundamental things which are changing position are the planets. So the change of position of the planets is the perceivable aspect of time. And the primary planet is the sun, and the change of position of the sun in relation to the earth, or whatever, if you don't want to be geocentric, the other way around. Observationally, the change of position of the sun in relation to the earth causes the year to happen. So the year is the perceivable aspect of something imperceivable, which is time. Sometimes I can't really understand anything that you guys are saying in the chat. Like it seems like it's leaving off words or leaving out people. But I don't understand what Barbara. What guided intellect is soul's attention? She did possessed, experienced only what he was focused on, was paying attention to. I don't know what that means. You can only type once every 2 minutes, so try to take your time and make it worth it. Puranjana's enemy, named Forceful Change, symbolizes the year, which is the perceivable part of time. His army, the army of Forceful Change, was composed of sky dwellers, Gandharvas. Why? Obviously, well, you perceive the year in the sky. His army was composed of sky dwellers, 360 male and white, 360 female and dark. These symbolize the days and the nights of a year. Time, Narada says, eventually gives birth to a daughter. Remember the daughter of time? Kalakanya? She symbolizes old age. In the allegory, no one wants to marry her but Death accepts her as his sister. In this story, Death is represented as the foreign king, Yavanara. Foreigners represent entities that enter the body and cause disease in the body and mind. Interesting. Gradually, they take over the city and cause excess fever and chills, leading to death. So, the enemies, there's two enemies. There's kind of one enemy, really. It's time. Chandavega. Chandavega means the force of change. And that's really what time is, the force of change. Time works its effects through the passing of years. It eventually produces old age. So in the story, in the allegory, time eventually produces Kalakanya, the daughter of time. She's old age. Nobody wants her. But death can make her a part of his team. Because old age brings on death. So death accepts her as a sister or part of his team. Then when what the Kalakanya or old age does to the city is weaken it. It weakens the gates, it weakens the walls, and it weakens the protector. The protector gets fatigued. Yes, you missed that. They didn't marry. That was clear. We did talk about that. He's the sister. She's the sister. Um, the effect of time is to weaken the body. Then what happens if your body is weak? This is why you don't want to be weak. You want to get enough sleep. By not getting sleep, you don't get sick, but by not getting sleep, you get weak. And then when you're weak, you get sick. Or like, for example, being too cold. It doesn't make you sick. Being too cold doesn't make you sick, but it makes you tired and weak. And when you're tired and weak, you get sick. What old age does is that. It makes you weak. And then when you're weak, the gates and everything don't resist the foreigners. There's other entities outside of our body that are also trying to exploit and enjoy the world and hunt animals. And we're an animal in their world. And they're trying to kill us. They're trying to eat us. Trying to get us. Just like we're trying to kill and eat other stuff. As long as your body is strong, then you resist them. You have natural defenses. But old age makes the body weak. Then you get these things called foreigners. That's germs, bacteria, all these other things. And there's foreigners that are affecting the mind as well. According to this system of medicine, there's mental diseases caused by foreign elements that attack the mind. According to this. Or it may be that the mind is dependent on the body. So when the body becomes fatigued or broken, it causes chemical imbalances, etc. And then that affects the mind. So that's what the foreigners are. The king of the foreigners is the ultimate effect of the foreigners, which is death. Thanks, Alf. Bardo says, why does death get to be a character in the story? Well, time gets to be a character in the story because it's a story, an allegorical story. We're going to talk about what happens to the main character, Paranjana, and death is one of the things that happens. Fever is a character. Old age is a character. I mean, your power of vision is a character. The vision of red is a character. It's one of the girlfriends. The vision of blue is a character. Don't be so picky. So in the story, death is represented as the foreign king. Foreigners represent entities that enter the body and cause disease in the body and mind. Yes, it makes sense like that. They enter the body, and by entering the body, they cause problems in the body, and by causing problems in the body, they cause problems in the mind. Gradually, they take over the city and cause excess fever and chills, leading to death. That was the king's. That was death's brother, which is fever and chills. Then he says, Paranjana could live in a city for 100 years, and that symbolizes a typical lifespan. Now, this is the last paragraph that I translated today. He says, Narada says, Paranjana's story shows. This is really amazing. Let me read you the Sanskrit to this one. There's a cool phrase in this. Give me a second to get this particular verse up here. Bhagavatam, 4th canto, chapter 29. And this is like 25. Text. Oh, we went past 20. How is this translated here? Yeah, here it is. I don't know how this got translated this way. All right, here it is. Here's the Sanskrit. Evam bahu vidhayar dukhaya Daiva Bhutatma Sambhava. Klishyamanam Shatam Varsham Dehe Dehi Tamovrita. That's kind of the lead in. So let me just translate this. Like Bardo just said, like Alf just said, great movie, Samurai. Oh, okay, I understand. Um, so translating this part, the story shows that the living being struggles in so many ways. Dukhar, Dukhar, Bahu Vidhayar Dukhar. The living beings get so many struggles. Pranjana had so many enemies and so many problems that he gets from Daiva, from like unavoidable sources. From what Daiva actually means like the enforcement of the results of his actions. Then he might get from Bhuta, which means from other beings like the foreigners, or that he might get from Atma himself. He can just have unhappiness within the Antapura, within the inside of the city. Klishimana Shatam Varsham, so for he can spend 100 years struggling, Klisha, and confused, Tamavrita, in his city, Deho Dehi, as the citizen inside the city. Then he says, Pranendriya Mano Dharman Atman Adhyasya Nirguna Shete Kamalavan Dhyayam Mamahamiti Karma Krit. You remember the Paul Deepika was talking about the fractions of the sign, the amshas of the sign, and was using the words amsha, lava, and bug, tribagi, for the trekana, and navalava for navamsha. Lava means a fraction of something, a fragment of something. And this word is used in this sentence here. Kamalava, a fraction of pleasure. Shete. Shete means to lie down or to dwell upon something. So what Narada Muni is saying right here is the soul, just to lie down for a second with a fraction of pleasure, goes through 100 years of struggles. That's pretty amazing. And confusion and difficulty. His story shows how a living being struggles in so many ways, beset with troubles and confusions because of investing itself entirely into its body, through its intellect and vital force, in an attempt to enjoy a fraction of selfish and possessive pleasure. Mamaham Kamalava. In an attempt to enjoy a fraction of selfish, possessive pleasure, he invests himself completely into the vehicle which will provide that pleasure. But to maintain that vehicle takes a lot of work. And that's the moral of the story of Puranjana's story. All right, any questions? Last questions? The next is Narada's going to talk more about the moral of the story. And then he's going to give another analogy about a deer and explain that analogy. And then it'll be done. All right. I should probably wait a couple of more seconds to see if anybody has a question that they're typing in. This is interesting from Samurai. I really like the first thing that it said about the king. He was seeking a city for himself to rule. That is the whole problem, maybe right there, our need to control, to rule the world. Good observation, really good observation. Okay, thank you, Melissa. Thanks, everybody. And I'll see you next week. Thank you, CB.